here at Macquarie, and I'll go through some of the features of the Arboretum and the activities that we run and some of the outreach that we run using the Arboretum, and then I'll talk about the successes and challenges. So firstly, about me, I've been working at Macquarie Uni for about four and a half years, and I started off in the Department of Biology doing administration and events, and joined the biodiversity subcommittee that was set up by sustainability at that time, and then gradually moved across, and I now work part-time for sustainability as the Arboretum Coordinator, but I still work part-time within biological sciences. My background before that, years and years ago, is a Bachelor of Science majoring in botany, and then working for an environment NGO for many, many years in a range of campaigns for urban bushland and native vegetation protection and catchment management. So my background is a botanist. I know a little bit about plants. I'm not very good at growing them, but I do like to know what they're called. So moving on to the Arboretum. So the Macquarie University Arboretum, hang on, just get the controls sorted. Okay. The Macquarie University Arboretum, of course, like any other arboretum, it's a living collection of trees. It's a very important part of the Macquarie landscape, but the Macquarie University Arboretum includes all of the plants on campus. So it's not just the trees. We also have landscaping, bushes and shrubs, and a number of gardens scattered around the university. For us, it's a tool, a valuable resource for learning and teaching, but it also connects with the past. It connects with the previous land use in the area, it connects with the local community, and it connects with the people, past and present. The university is relatively new by Australian standards, so it was developed as a university in the 1960s, with I think the first year graduating in 1969. Before that, the area was used as market gardens and chicken farms. So the market gardens were cut flower markets and fruit orchards. And then the area was settled in the mid 1800s, I think it was, or early 1800s. And then before that, of course, it was native forest. So it's we're in the Ryde area, which is just northwest of the Sydney CBD, and it's home to the Darug Aboriginal group of people. So we have we're building strong connections with the Darug people. We have very strong connections with the native forest, both on campus and in the surrounding area. Macquarie University backs on to the Lane Cove National Park, and we are very fortunate to have our own remnant native forest on campus. So I'll just talk a little bit about some of the elements that we have on campus. So the native vegetation, we have one largish area that has been here since before the campus was developed and since before the area was settled. So it's one of those small areas that was never cleared, and it is now an endangered ecological community. It's Sydney turpentine ironbark forest. It's endangered both at a state and federal level. I think there's less than 0.5% left, and it's very important for us as a university community. So we've protected that area. We're now managing it to reduce the weeds and to improve its integrity and its resilience. We also have a number of areas of regrowth across the campus, native trees that have just regrown by themselves, or groups of trees that have been allowed to regenerate naturally. This area connects with the Lane Cove National Park. We're hoping that we'll connect some corridors through the campus over time so that native birds and other animals, mammals, can actually use the campus as habitat. Some of them do already, but we want to enhance that, so we've actually got travelling ways both on campus and off campus. For the landscape plantings, most of the plantings were done in the 1970s and 1980s. I've got the two names up on the screen there. Walter Abram was the architect planner for the university, and Richard Clough was the landscape consultant. And they worked together for a couple of decades to make the campus what it is today. So there are plantings of native trees, eucalypts from various places. We have a large area of lemon-scented gums in the centre of the campus, but we also have about 10 different species of eucalypts planted in groves around the campus. And then there's also very strong elements of deciduous trees from the Northern Hemisphere. So the picture on screen is a group of liquid ambers that are near the Vice-Chancellor's office. And we have a couple of other groups of autumn colour around the campus, which look absolutely spectacular because we have the right climate for it. And so we're bringing those elements together, and part of what we want to do for the future of the Arboretum is actually build on those elements and enhance them. So they're not just standalone things that look pretty, they actually connect with the university, with the staff, the students, and the surrounding community. We also have a number of courtyards and gardens around campus. The Arboretum is very much initiated by the Department of Biological Sciences in conjunction with Macquarie Sustainability. So the idea of the Arboretum had been around for 10 years, but using plants as education resource has been around a lot longer, since, well, forever, but for Macquarie University since the university was started. And so the Department of Biological Sciences was the first to create a teaching garden on campus, which was the Frank Mercer Biological Sciences Garden. And that was created in the late 70s, so about 10 years after the campus was initiated. And it's a teaching garden that features different groups of plants and a sort of a rainforest annex. It's used as undergraduate teaching tool, but it's also a place where postgraduate researchers can plant out their plants once they've finished using them, if it fits in with the garden. And then complementing that, we have an earth sciences garden that was developed a little bit later, a few years later, which ties in the evolution of plants with undergraduate geology and the concept of plate tectonics and the movement of continents around the planet. And they are very well established gardens and work really well. One of the great things about having the Arboretum as a concept, and just to take a step back, the Arboretum was launched officially in 2010. So the idea had been around for about 10 years to have an Arboretum on campus. But it was only in 2010 when the partnership between biology and sustainability got going, with the strong support of the then VC, Stephen Schwartz, that we actually got the Arboretum launched and identified as a concept across the campus, and one that everyone can hook into. And the first sort of big success arising from that was the development of a bush tucker garden. We had a car park on campus that was no longer desirable as a car park. We wanted to make that area more of a pedestrian walkway. So we got offered the car park for the Arboretum, and there were funds available to develop it into a bush tucker garden. And it's looking fantastic. We've had a couple of years of good rain, so it's taken off and it's producing. We have native raspberries that are very tasty and abundant. So we've had a couple of successes there. And we have other courtyards scattered across the campus, which are already great spaces to be in. They have well-established trees in there, so they are part of the Arboretum. And in time, we'll hopefully change the character of those courtyards to be more interesting botanically, as well as still being a great space to just hang out and study or relax or get away from things. The Arboretum has been a fantastic way of linking the different elements across campus. So it started off as a very much a biology focused tool, I guess, or resource. But what we're trying to do is actually link it not only with undergraduate students within biology and science, but also across to other areas in campus and also to the wider community. So we've developed a number of walks and guided tours. We have a couple of practicals developed to go with our walks that for undergraduate tutorials. And we're linking with sustainability and people that are interested in all things sustainability, whether it's power reduction or efficient water use, or developing a community garden, or just gradually getting interested in what's growing around them. And we're also tying in with the museums and collections across campus. So we have, I think, 5 different museums on campus. One is a biological sciences museum, but we also have an ancient cultures museum, and there's definitely room for us to connect with those, to take what is in the museum out into an actual environment. So people can go into, say, the Ancient Cultures Museum and see some of the first paper that was made out of papyrus. And then hopefully one day they'll be able to go out to the garden and they'll be able to see what papyrus actually looks like when it's growing. And then they can make a stronger connection between things that grow, things that are around them, the living environment, and how people use that for resources for everyday life. And that's one of the things we hope to develop in the future. We've started developing some activities for school groups. The Macquarie University has a very strong program for getting Year 10 students particularly onto campus to see what is on offer at a university and to help them decide what they want to do when they're choosing universities or thinking about further study later on. And the age bracket of sort of 8 to 10 is when they have the time and when they're starting to think about what subjects they might pick in year 11 and 12. Of course, by the time they get to year 11 and 12, it's kind of too late. They've already chosen their subjects and they're working really hard to try and get through the HSC. So not a lot of time to wander around and look at plants and relax a little bit. So we have a couple of programs on campus. There's one run through sustainability. There's another one run through the Faculty of Science. And particularly the one through the Faculty of Science, we actually use the plant evolution walk that we have developed as a tool for teaching students about plants and about the evolution of plants. One of the things we found out is that once they get to high school, they stop learning too much about the ecology of plants. They learn about photosynthesis and the difference between plant cells and animal cells. But beyond that, they don't really learn anything about plants. So this is a great opportunity to say, okay, plants are amazing, and this is many of the ways that they are amazing, as well as tying it in with actual science that they can use if they want to take that knowledge further and they want to actually study plants as they get older. And there's plenty of different streams of interest based on plants. It's not just necessarily an academic career in botany. There are so many other ways, so many other areas. We have a website which we have developed over the last couple of years, and any information that we have, whether it's about walks or tours or education or the trees on campus, we're putting into the website. So that is the central resource. Part of that is to gradually map the trees on campus, which is actually quite a tricky job, partly using the GPS and partly knowing what tree you're standing under, because the eucalypts do tend to look the same. And then also developing a series of interpretive signs around the campus and plant labels for some of the bigger trees and some of the more amazing trees.
We're just going to take a quick pause there and see if anybody has any questions or if they're having any problems hearing anything. If you've just joined when the presentation was going, you'll see on the control panel there's a questions section where you can type in a question and I can read that out for you on your behalf, and Sam can then answer it. So if you do have a question, please go ahead and type something in there now and we can get to it. Otherwise, Sam will just keep moving on with the presentation, but we like to provide the opportunity for you, and plus it gives Sam a break to have a breather while we think about whether anyone has questions. So I'll just wait another few seconds to see if anything comes up in the questions area, and then I'll hand back over to Sam to keep going with the presentation. So far, all is quiet. Hopefully you are understanding where I'm talking about on the control panel where you can type the question. Otherwise, if you're not sure where the questions functionality is, there's also a chat functionality you can use. But as there's nothing coming through, I'll hand back over to Sam so she can keep going with the presentation. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Leanne. So one of the stronger links I mentioned briefly before was with sustainability. So not only do we have the Arboretum, we're running walks, we're hopefully going to plant more trees and highlight the value and joy of trees. We also have a very strong sustainability element, and that's expressed or linked with the Arboretum through the bush care work that we do. So we had our first bush care site at Mars Creek, which runs through campus, established, I think it was in 2008, 2009. And the main picture on the screen is how that site looked in 2009. We had just started planting some new understory plants. The creek is just behind that band of trees, and you can see there's still a little bit of lawn there and a little bit of clearing. That area now is fully revegetated and looks absolutely amazing. And that is going to stretch across campus as well. We get people that are really keen to plant trees and really keen to know about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And for the Mars Creek area, it's to try and establish a more natural riparian area. But it's also, again, an educational tool. It increases the diversity of native vegetation on campus, and it helps educate the community and students, particularly international students, about the native vegetation of Australia. The fauna park is another area on campus which is quite heavily vegetated with native vegetation. It is still used by brain behaviour and evolution as a research area for mostly reptiles and birds and fish. But they used to have mammals there. They used to have wallabies and emus in that area. We're now seeing a shift. The mammals and birds, or the larger birds, have been moved out to other areas off campus, and there's now more of a switch over to plant ecology. Macquarie University is one of the top universities in the world for plant ecology. It regularly rates very high, and it has very high level academics and lab groups. So we're seeing more of a shift. People are using that space for native plant plots, and they'll measure the traits and how they respond to climate change. And so we have this connection coming in with biology and biology research, not just being contained within the Department of Biology, but actually stretching across the Arboretum and becoming more known in the general community, either through campus or into the community around the campus area in the North Ryde community, which is fantastic because it means that people in the area understand more about what's happening at a university level, but they can also see what's happening. They can look over the fence and they can see the plants growing and they can feel a connection to that, which is why the Arboretum is such a great concept. The other one I've listed on this slide is the wetland. We have a constructed wetland going in at the top of Mars Creek, where Mars Creek comes into the campus. And the purpose of this is to improve the water quality and also hopefully help control the flow of water onto the campus. We're obviously surrounded by a very urban environment, so as soon as it rains, we have a peak flow coming through Mars Creek. So the wetland will hopefully help mitigate that flow so it doesn't just rush through campus, and it will trap silt and nutrients so that the water flowing through Mars Creek and then into the Lane Cove River is much cleaner. And hopefully we'll start getting some good frog populations and other native animals coming in and feeling more comfortable with our creek system. And it'll be vegetated with native plants, and we'll be able to take groups through, talk to them about constructed wetlands, talk to them about native wetland vegetation, and they get an understanding of wetland ecosystems. So not strictly trees, not strictly arboretum, but still ties in with that greater understanding and appreciation of biodiversity. I've talked a little bit about the museums and collections already. One of the things I didn't mention though is some of the fantastic connections we've made with the art gallery and the sculpture park. So the Arboretum coexists with the campus buildings, but it also coexists with the sculpture park. And last year, the art gallery ran an exhibition called Arboreal, and we ran a couple of activities and a couple of tours in conjunction with that exhibition, and also in conjunction with the sculpture park. So we took some tours around the sculptures, which was a fantastic initiative. Nothing like that had been done before here, where the curator of the sculpture park could talk about different sculptures and how they fit into the Macquarie environment. And then I could talk about the trees, which were right next to the sculptures. And so it was a mixed audience, different people learning more about trees and learning more about the campus. And the feedback was extremely positive. So we're looking forward to continuing those linkages, whether it's with the art gallery or with the other museums that we have on campus. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the successes, or some of the other successes, and then I'll finish up with talking about the challenges, which I guess is where most of the questions will come in. So the successes are essentially what we've already talked about. The Arboretum has been going since 2010, so we're just at the end of our second year, and we've already established a number of walks. We have interpretive signage in the ground, we have a website full of information, and we have connections with parts of the university. The reason why we have been so successful in the last 2 years is the people involved. So we have great people in the Department of Biological Sciences and in sustainability, and we have the support of the Vice-Chancellor's office. We had the support of the then Vice-Chancellor, Stephen Schwartz, in actually getting this off the ground, and that's what has made this happen. So without that, it would have been a lot slower and it wouldn't have been as successful. We also work with what tend to be very siloed parts of the university. So property management and grounds maintenance, they're in their own area, but we need to work with them. And so we have good contacts within there, sustainability people in there, but also the grounds maintenance staff. And they have good connections with the Department of Biology. And so we have key people and we all work together to improve, to basically to make this arboretum happen. And then we're starting to connect with museums and the art gallery. So the staff in there are really supportive of the Arboretum. They're really supportive of the knowledge and information about trees being shared with their groups. So it's not just, art gallery people saying, these are my people, Arboretum people, they're your people. We're actually mixing those up and sharing the information and building the appreciation on both sides. Also, the staff and students have been really supportive and appreciative of the Arboretum initiative. There are people, the campus is it's not a huge campus, but it's big enough that people within the arts faculty or within business, they're on the western side of campus, people in the science faculty on the eastern side of campus, and they just don't go to the other end of campus. So when we run guided tours at lunchtime during the week, we get people from all across campus and they start learning about things that parts of the campus they may never have seen before, or trees that they walk past every day and didn't know anything about. So it's fantastic for people who actually work and study here to get an appreciation of their campus. And then, of course, there's the educational and outreach programs, the science experiences where we have the Year 10 students come on, and they come on to get a taste of university. So they might come on a plant evolution walk, and before or after that, they might have heard a lecture about business or marketing, and they might go and do an art activity. So it's quite an interesting program where they get a taste of all the different things that we have here at Macquarie, and it's great to be able to have that resource that we can use. On this slide, also just to show the staff involvement, on the right hand side there's a design of dead leaves in a swirling pattern around the trunk of a tree. This is actually in the biology courtyard. It's one of the academics here at Macquarie, Michael Gillings. He's a professor. And every year, as the leaves fall from the Liriodendron, it's an American tulip tree, he gathers them up and he makes these beautiful patterns. And then he gets leaves from other trees. I think the bright yellow that you can see is from a ginkgo tree, and then adds that in. And the pattern is different every year, but it's called ephemeral artwork. There's a few other things that happen around campus and people he knows, but this is one that happens every year. As soon as the leaves start to fall, people start looking at the courtyard to see what's going to happen. And so we're bringing that in, and bringing that appreciation of trees and appreciation of the outdoor space right across the campus, which is great. So some of the challenges. The main challenge is that Macquarie is first and foremost a university campus. So it has a number of buildings and it has a very long-term 50-year concept plan for future buildings. And that's already mapped out and signed off, and it's been signed off since 2009. Now the Arboretum was launched in 2010. So we are trying to fit in development of the Arboretum around the buildings plan. And the Macquarie University is valued as an open space campus, it's a park-like campus. It has a rolling open lawn area surrounding a lake. And so we don't want to clog that up, so to speak, or take that away or replace it with a grove of trees. We want to enhance that lawn space by adding trees that will make the Arboretum even more tree-like, even more of an Arboretum. But then we have to work within the buildings and within the building footprints to do that, or outside the building footprints to do that. So that's one of the tricky things. And of course, the other one is just the overall size of the campus and funding. So the campus is, I think it's about 164 hectares, and that's the whole campus, including all the buildings. When you compare this with some of the big arboreta overseas, one of the biggest ones in the UK is Westernburt Arboretum, which is in the southwest of the UK, and that's managed by their National Forests Group, Forestry Commission, whatever it's called, and they have a much larger space. I think it's about 600 hectares. And then one of the other ones in North America, the Arnold Arboretum, which is attached to Harvard University. Harvard University is a sort of a similar size. It's around 400 hectares. I can't remember exactly what the size is. And then the Arnold Arboretum is within that. It's about, I think, 200 hectares, but there are no buildings. There's probably an information centre and a couple of meeting rooms or amenities blocks, but it doesn't have a campus contained within the Arboretum. So they have more freedom to plan trees, groves of trees and different areas. whereas here at Macquarie we're constrained by where the buildings are, where the buildings will be in the future, and then of course all the other things on top of that, like climate and soil. So that's one of our biggest challenges. Funding, of course, is always a challenge. We don't have the long-term history of an established university. We're still growing. We're still putting in fantastic buildings and centres, and there's been a huge investment in that over the last couple of years. So there's not a big slush fund of funds to say, here you go, Arboretum, have $100,000 to develop a new specialist garden or grove. So that's something that we need to be creative about in the future. And then, of course, the other limitations, particularly when you don't have a lot of funding, is the climate and soil. So with a small amount of funding, we can put in trees here and there. We can do very small scale additions to the Arboretum. But then we have to work with the climate and the soil that we have here on campus. So some areas do trap water quite a lot, but then are also subject to drought. So we've had a good couple of years where we've had heaps of rain and everything is growing and quite lush, but we're heading into another period of dry. So if we get too excited and plant a lot of trees, it's a good chance that a lot of those will die when they can't cope with the drought. So that's one of my other challenges, is to actually plan that and get advice from, preferably free advice, from probably outside the university, so that we can actually choose the right plants that will grow at their best and enhance the Arboretum. And that's about it from me.
Okay, we'll just, again, we'll just see if there's any questions out there, so we can keep an eye on that. If anyone has any questions at all, please use that questions functionality within the control panel, particularly around the successes and the challenges. It's always good to get further clarification on that aspect. I'm just pausing to make sure that people have time to write a question. I think what I will add is Sam works for sustainability to manage the Arboretum 2 days a week, essentially. So 2 days of every week, her time is devoted to further developing the Arboretum and the educational resources that go with that. So we have put a requirement against making the Arboretum useful and resourceful by having someone specifically attend to it. So there's obviously a budget consideration there. Sam and I also, every year, we negotiate what kind of budget she'll need to get things done. We try and build new gardens or walks every year so that it stays alive and continues to grow, because the more we do with it, the more we can try and engage with our internal and external community. So it's often a difficult sell trying to get money specifically for the Arboretum, but we always make sure we put something into the budget so that Sam has something to work with, whether it be for signage, for planting, walk developments, whatever it might be, but so she can keep the Arboretum going. Now, Gary has asked, how many plant species do you have? So I'm going to hand back over to Sam to answer that question.
Thanks, Gary. That is a very good question. We haven't actually done a full audit of the species we have on campus, and I don't have a number to hand. I do have a species list in an Excel spreadsheet, which I'm gradually updating. I would guess it would be around 300 species, but that is a very wild guess because I just haven't done a count. But it is something that we are doing. We have a searchable database, so you can actually type in the name of a species, and if it's on campus, it will show you where it is on a map. One of the things that I need to develop to complement that is an actual list of what we have on campus and the stats, the kind of stats that you're just requesting, how many plant species we have. Because there are a lot within the various teaching gardens, and of course things change over time.
Thanks, Sam. And Gary's also asked, what size of budget staff levels are you working with? So Sam is employed for 2 days a week, as I said, and she's level 7 Hugh. So, the equivalent of 2 days per week, 52 weeks a year at Hugh level 7. And then about $15,000 to $20,000, depending on the generosity of the university per annum, to do other things such as more plantings or develop those walks or install the interpretive signs. We do a lot of the design for our signs in-house. We have a template and we just work within our own team to design the signs, so we don't have to worry about external costs there. The cost comes in when we actually have the signs made and installed. So if we want to do it right, we obviously have to put the resources to it. You could probably do it with less than what we put into it and still have a reasonable arboretum. And of course, you could do it with much more than what we put into it and have an awesome arboretum. It's just trying to find that balance between what's a reasonable and feasible sized budget to put together and to request for each year. I think generally with the 15,000 that Sam has at hand, she's able to achieve most of the stuff that she would like to do on a yearly basis. So I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Sam.
If I could. So in terms of budget, one of the things I was talking about before, the bush tucker garden that we have in place, a couple of these are big projects. The wetland that's going in now, which is not my budget, that's being funded by property, so a different area of the university. And another one that I forgot to mention was an Indian spice garden that we developed this year, and very different budgets. So the wetland is that's a huge construction. It's a constructed wetland, lots of very heavy machinery, so it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Our bush tucker garden, which has about 30 to 40 species of plants in it, and I can't give you a sort of a square meter area. It's not a huge area, but it's probably about 20 square meters, I guess. That bush tucker garden was over $100,000, and again, not out of my budget. Luckily, there was another area in the university that had funds available that we could use. The Indian spice garden, on the other hand, is something that we've tried to do with a small budget. We had $2,000, and we used a pre-existing garden and some in-kind support from the property management side of the university, and they basically took out all the plants that were already in there, which were just standard landscaping plants, nothing particularly exciting, and some palms, and put some more dirt in, and then we sourced the plants out of our budget. But it was very much people doing sort of in-kind support, and a very, very different outcome from the bush tucker garden. So we've had and the Indian spice garden is a tricky garden anyway, because we don't have quite the right climate for it. But that was the $2,000 budget, and the garden has not quite taken off. So we still need to invest more funds and more time into that garden to make it as good as what we'd like it to be. So we can do quite a bit with a small amount of funding, but the funding of sort of in the order of $100,000 means that we can do a much larger garden and more complex, and we can get external contractors in to do the work, which just makes the work more efficient and more species and more plant diversity and density.
I think Sam's always looking out for opportunities as well, but the Ancient Cultures Garden that she referred to earlier, she's actually trying to work with the Ancient Cultures Museum and their team to see if we could co-fund something. And apart from that, where there's opportunities through the property budget, if for example they have a parcel of land and not quite sure what to do with it, Sam will go in and take the opportunity of trying to get that land and some of their budget to make something happen. Another important component is Sam's been working on a sponsorship document so that we can try and get some level of funding externally through sponsorship, going through other organisations that may want to put some money towards having their logo or their signage on one of our interpretive signs and claiming an aspect of the Arboretum as their own for as long as the sponsorship runs.
And just to follow up with that sponsorship document, I mean, this is sort of where our planning and thinking is going into the future, is not relying on budgets contained within the university, but actually developing an ongoing support group. So like a friends group, a group within the campus that focuses on the Arboretum, focuses on its development and future, helps source funds, gets involved with planting days. So that's sort of the more long-term initiatives that we'll need to work more on.
And the value of that is that not only are you getting the benefit for the Arboretum on campus, you're making good connections with the community around you again. So it's all about relationships and partnerships and building up the connections that you can make. Are there any other questions from anyone else? Thank you for that, Gary. Hopefully we've been able to answer both those questions enough to your satisfaction. Just pausing in case anybody else has any questions to ask. All is quiet on the questions front. Hopefully that means Sam did a really good job of explaining everything. Any other questions about setting it up, for example? That's always a really good thing. Have we done a tree survey, Ideal?
We have a couple of tree surveys. We have a couple of surveys that are sort of several decades old, one for our fauna park, and we have a more recent tree survey for 2 parts of the campus. So in answer to the question, yes, we have. We don't have a complete tree survey for the whole campus though. So we're gradually putting lists together, gradually seeking students and volunteers to help identify trees we have on campus and to help map them as well. And we're gradually labelling some of the key trees on campus. We actually have quite a lot, so we're not going to label every single tree. But if we label the more prominent ones, then people will start to get familiar with what those trees look like and see how frequently they occur across campus.
And another question from Ideal, following the Burnley method for urban trees.
I'm not actually familiar with the Burnley method, so I will need to do some research into that and find out more about it.
If you want to add anything to that, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, Sam's not able to answer that question at this stage, but she's writing it down madly, so I'm sure she's going to go and research that now and find out more about it. It's certainly been an interesting experience setting up the Arboretum. As Sam said, having it as an idea for a decade and it not moving anywhere, sometimes it's just serendipity that you are able to put all the right people in the right room and have the right conversation, and then you can make things happen. One more from Ideal, why call it an arboretum rather than using the term urban forest?
Okay, that's a good question. I had never even thought of using the term urban forest. North Ryde is an urban area, but it's also very, very heavily treed. So the trees that we have on campus are scattered throughout the buildings. We do have some groves of trees, but it's not a single grove. It's not one single big grove. So an urban forest would kind of imply something a bit different and not quite what we're aiming for in terms of how people see us and what people will expect to see when they come on campus. The term arboretum, again, it's possibly not strictly true because so much of what we have on campus are shrubs and also ground plants. So our teaching gardens do have trees in them, but they're not teaching gardens for trees. They're teaching gardens for all sorts of plants. But we do have areas within the on campus that do look like an arboretum. So you walk through a grove of mature trees, they're spaced out on a lawn area, and you can appreciate the size and the shape and the difference of those trees. So that's why we went for the term arboretum, and also because we want to eventually have the arboretum sit up amongst those famous arboreta. So there's a couple within Australia. The University of Adelaide has the Waite Arboretum, which is long established, and there's a couple of other arboreta in Australia, small ones, but there are the big arboreta across the Northern Hemisphere, so in Europe and in North America, that we're particularly, I guess, aspiring to match at some point in the future. Even if we can't match space, we do want to match the grandeur and the diversity and the beauty. Just if I can go back to Adil's original question following the Burnley method for urban trees, What I'm wondering, if you can type in if this method refers to signage and the way that trees are labelled, or if it's documentation for an arboretum. If it is about tree labelling, I can talk a little bit about that. We are using aluminium signs that have the family, the scientific name, and the common name, and also the origin. So those four categories. And we are attaching those around the trees using a thing called I can't even remember the name of it, but it is a rubber chain. It's called chain link. It's a rubber chain, and you basically put it around the tree, and you just interlock it, and it doesn't go into the tree at all. It doesn't harm the tree at all. And the way we've attached it to the trees means that as the tree grows, we can let the links out so that it won't strangle the tree or constrain it in any way.
I think that's another important element is the fact that we're just trying to put signage on our trees and label them because information is knowledge. And once people see a sign, they're inclined to read it. So without even uh, really doing much, we're hopefully adding to their knowledge bank on information and getting that appreciation of trees. David has said the Burnley method is used for valuation of trees based on their input to the landscape.
Well, thank you very much for that, David, and thanks, Odile, for asking the question originally. I will actually follow up on this and do some research into it. It's the first I've heard about the Burnley method, so I'll follow it up and see how our arboretum fits in with that.
If there's any other questions, please post them now. Otherwise, we'll wrap up the webinar for today. Thank you all for coming along. Thanks, David. David's just said it's one of two methods commonly used. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Thank you all for joining in today. If you do leave the presentation or the webinar and you find you have other questions come up as you've been thinking about it, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you, Ideal, for thanking us. We appreciate you being online. You can contact Rhiannon or myself and we can pass the message on to Sam if you like. And if you're not sure of Rhiannon's contact details, it's on the ACTS website, info@acts.asn.au, and she'll be more than happy to pass that on. We do have another webinar session next week and a reminder will go out about that as well, but hopefully you'll be interested in joining that one as well. I'd like to thank Sam for giving us her overview of what we've done here at Macquarie. Hopefully you'll be inspired to do something similar so that you can start to publicly value your trees as well. Good luck to anyone who is going down this path. And we'll speak again soon. Thank you again, everybody.
Thanks.